This video is brought to you by Starke Audio. They're having a big Black Friday sale on their website, so make sure to check it out and use the code J5 for additional 5% off on already existing sale prices, and more on Starke Audio components on later part of this video.
So we spent a lot of time just fiddling around, trying different parts and different ways of building the crossover, different designs, and we ended up with a crossover it's completely, many would maybe say, overkill for a speaker in this price range. And I think we can confidently say that you won't find any speaker within this price range that has this level of attention and detail to the crossover design. It's really a big upgrade. It's a speaker that will just make you want to listen more and more.
So today we're talking about the Buchardt S400 Mk2. And if you think that this is the normal Buchardt S400, Tujin will tell you,
you're dead wrong.
This is not the same thing. So initially when I got this speaker in and we listened to it, we did a first impression, and people commented how Tujin gave his first impression and compared it to the ELAC Unify reference speakers and said that this was the, basically the ELAC Unify speakers on steroids. He was wrong. Were you wrong?
I was wrong.
He was wrong. And the reason I didn't give my impression when it came to the first impression, video is because I was very underwhelmed. I didn't really know what to think about it because the original S400 was a beast. It sounded badass. It sounded deep bass, punchy mids, just floor standard level of performance in a bookshelf speaker. And that was the selling point. That was what was so special about the Buchardt S400. The Mark II didn't have that. Placed it in the exact same spot I placed the S400, which was about 4 feet off the wall. The bass was non-existent. There was bass, that's over-exaggerating. But compared to the original S400, there was no bass to be had. So I was like, So I was about to make the review, but then, I gotta try different placements or, it wouldn't make sense. So I thought to myself, you know what? This speaker is lacking bass a little bit. Let's put this speaker a little bit towards the wall. So I put it about 2 feet. No, about 1.5 feet initially. And Tujin and I were sitting down and we're listening to it, and we were just
mind blown.
Mind blown. Totally freaking mind blown. The entire speaker's performance changed from to what the? And you may think we're exaggerating, but we're not exaggerating whatsoever. I mean, we're talking about, yes, the mids were better than the S400, the high frequency was better than the S400, the overall soundstage imaging was all better, but that bass performance was no longer there. It was almost listening to a speaker that was very well measuring, but without really that character that the original S400 had, to just by placing the speakers a little bit closer to the wall, to a performance that was just better than the S400 in every way possible. Now, this is without being said, but the original S400 has that little bit of bass hump. So it gives you that nice floor standard performance and really good punch. Now, the Mark II does some things a little bit differently. Now, the Mark II is more refined in the high frequency, more refined in the mid-range, and that comes from partially the change in the mid-range woofer. The mid-range woofer is now paper cone-based instead of aluminum. And the cabinet is a bit larger and a little bit more slimmer than the original S400. But the most important part is that the crossover on this is a beast. It uses really high quality components. I'm talking about the oil dipped, oil dipped just incredible stuff. Okay, to give you a reference, it's better than what is inside the Electamator 3 speakers, and those are $10,000 speakers. And we're talking about speakers like, even Wilson Audio, Sonos Fiber, Focal. A lot of the high-end products, right, don't use this kind of components. In fact, Buchardt put a lot of money into this crossover, and this was done by a new engineer they hired. So this crossover gives you that performance of that beautiful mid-range, beautiful high frequency that is well extended and more well refined than the original S400. Much less grain, much bigger soundstage, better imaging, better focus, all around. But the bass, right? The bass is the important part, because if you take away the S400's original bass character of that mid-bass hump and grunt, then is it the S400 anymore?
It's just a regular bookshelf.
It's just a regular bookshelf. But this speaker doesn't have that mid-bass bump. Not exactly. But it extends down deeper. And it rumbles. And to me, it sounds a more linear, more natural bass presentation than the S400. However, it doesn't have that mid-bass bump. So it gives you initially a little bit of a less impressive whoa factor, but once you get into your tracks and you start listening to it, and when there's bass heavy music coming in, bass demanding tracks, it really kicks in, and it's a more of a rumble and feel in the body kind of thing rather than the original S400s, smack in the head, smack in the chest with that mid bass bump.
I thought the S400 Mark II sound more grand.
Yes, well,
overall.
that's partially it. The bigger soundstage, the bigger depth, the better layering, the better high frequency. In terms of technical performance, comparing it to one of my favorite speakers of all time, the KLH Model 5s, technically speaking, the S400 Mark II is a better speaker. Now, in terms of taste and tone, I still prefer the Model 5, and it will be my own choice. However, technically speaking, the Buchardt S400 Mark II is probably the best technically performing, best sounding speaker in this price category of under $2,500 that we've ever heard. Now, Mads from Buchardt, the CEO, the founder, the great man behind Buchardt, was wrong about one thing. Initially, when Mads offered to send the Buchardt S400 Mark IIs, you saw in the beginning of this video, he sent me a Facebook message, hey, going, yay, I saw your Sonos Fiber Electamator 3 review, and you know what? That's exactly what we were going for. Wrong. Okay, so as Tujin said, with me, the performance is there. Jokes aside, the performance is there. Yes, it can compare to a Electamator 3 that's $10,000, which is ridiculous. However, the sound is totally different. In fact, the original S400 on steroids is what I imagine the Sonos Fiber Electamator 3 to be. More extended highs, better refined mids, but it still has that mid-bass, energy and mid-bass characteristic. Whereas this is a more linear extension. It is actually closer to what I associate with Wilson Audio speakers, kind of like the budget version. In fact, the speaker that comes to mind that resembles this speaker a lot is actually the bookshelf speaker from Wilson Audio, which was the Wilson Tune Tots. Yeah, the Tune Tots. And this speaker blew me away when I first listened to it, but the price tag was like, right? But this speaker, I would say, is like just bang on. Like, if I put it side by side, it will be like a very, very tough decision on which one to get. Now that we have that out of the way, I think that gives you a very good indication of how good this speaker's performance is. So we won't talk about that too much, well, at least for now. But we're going to talk about amplification, because this speaker is not hard to drive, but it needs some type of power. Like when I put in like the burst and funk, for example, or amplifiers that are not really rated for power, it doesn't really kick in. Just like the original S400, it needs a little bit of volume, not as much as before, but it needs a little bit of volume and needs a little bit of that power to start driving the speakers. So we tried it with mainly two different amplifiers that we really liked, and that was the Denafrips stack that we used, which was the Thalo and the Hades. And we also tried it with a Class D amplifier, which was from Starke Audio, which is one of my favorite Class D amplifiers of all time. And more on the Starke Audio, again, they're having a Black Friday sale, and if you saw my review of the AD4, This is a very, very good amplifier. Also, they're a speaker company and a subwoofer company as well, and they're having a big, entire website sale. So make sure to go check it out. Their Black Friday sales run until the end of December. And again, use the code J5 for additional 5% off on their already good sales. But all the endorsements and jokes aside, really, the Starke Audio was one of our favorite combinations in terms of the budget in mind. Now, Denafrips was my favorite, and I found that the Denafrips had a little bit more refined highs, but by a slight margin. The Starke Audio, in contrast, had a little bit more warmer sound, at least to my ears, but to Tujin's ears, he couldn't really tell a difference from one or the other, right?
No, I really couldn't.
Yeah, so both are really good choices, and considering the price and the promotion going on right now on their website, I think the Starke Audio is a very safe and good choice with this S400 Mark II or any speakers that really needs that power. Now, in terms of driving this speaker, I would say that this speaker doesn't require, like I said, a lot of power, but it benefits from a little bit of that driving capability, like from the Denafrips Stack or the Starke Audio. Now, you don't have to go all crazy with it, but even the IOTA VX would work well. I found the IOTA VX to have a little bit of more grainy texture in the mid-range, which you may actually like on this speaker. But if you're getting this speaker, I would suggest, one or the other, the Denafrips or the Starke Audio in this case. Now, when it comes to the overall performance, as indicated, we have a few tracks here that I've tried and noted down, if my computer would work. Ding! So one of the tracks that I played for the first time with the original S400 was Flight of the Cosmic Hippo. Now this track is very interesting because it gives you a very good indication of the snappiness of the high frequency while giving you that really good indication of that mid-bass energy and the lower frequency extension. It has grunt in the bottom end. And without fail, the S400 Mark II had quite a bit of extension with the right placement and really dig down low and really got that grunt and lower extension, but not just grunt like the original S400. It was more of a deeper dive into the bass octaves, which was very, very tasteful. Another thing that I noticed was that the high frequency, right, when it comes to that snaps, it was way more apparent and a little bit more refined than the original S400. I found that the original S400 seemed a little bit more strained compared to the Mark II. With the Mark II, it seems more effortless. It seems more seamless with the high frequency snap and the bass integration there. Now, I think I made a note here. Yeah, when it comes to the 57-second mark where the grunt comes in, where it goes bam, 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 right? The is like way more apparent when it comes to the Mark II compared to the original S400. With the original S400, there was more of a grunt, but those little nuances in the lower frequency that rumbles your foundation wasn't there. With this speaker, it is way more apparent and is way more impressive. Now, if you thought this speaker was all about bass, wrong. Like I said, the mid-range and the high frequency is at top-notch level. And I'm talking about like even better than some of these higher-end speakers. I'll just put it at that. So one of the tracks that I tried was here, Put On a Happy Face by J.D. Allen. Great saxophone, great jazz tracks here. And the saxophone sounds natural. Like I don't have to really hear like, is this a trumpet or saxophone? Like it's a saxophone. And you don't just hear like a boom, boom, right? You hear like the body of boom, like you hear the entire body of the instrument. And that is very important. And you hear that because it is able to augment that, lower octave bass. Because a saxophone, is a pretty, especially the tenor saxophone, which is what he's playing, is much bigger in size. And when the person actually plays the instrument, the air escaping, you hear all the parts of that, not just the note that it's making. If that makes any sense.
Complete sense.
In terms of the sound staging with this track, I found that it's not like a concert jazz, right? It's not like when you're at a concert, right, Tujin? It's not like when you're in a large stadium, but more like when you go to a jazz bar, one of those jazz bars I see in movies. I've never been to one, but like
private.
Yeah, I went to like underground jazz bars, but when you go drink beer and you have that little performance, and it's really nice because it's intimate enough, but the sound stage is big and you hear like in your chest rather than just in your ears. And it's like a sound, if you know what I mean, when you're at a jazz bar, it's a sound that kind of starts here and then comes down to your chest. It's a very unique feeling. Maybe I'm just sick, but that's what I feel. It's honestly what I feel. And again, with this track, there's snares and drum in the background. You hear it very clearly, but without detracting from the rest of the music. Often we are so focused on detail, like with some vocal speakers or magical speakers, which I'm not bashing them in any way. I love those details, but sometimes on certain tracks, those speakers kind of give you so much detail that it detracts from the main component of the music, which is the saxophone. In this case, I love the speaker because you hear the saxophone and you hear all of the elements in the music, but the layering is there, meaning you can definitely tell that the drum is behind, the saxophone, and the saxophone is in the main center of the stage with the drum left, a little bit onto the side here, a little bit back. So there's a little bit of space cues that's better portrayed on the speaker, in my opinion. And just for the heck of it, if you want to try another track by J.D. Allen that's really good, Stranger in Paradise. So the mid-range tone and texture and tonality is all excellent. I would say the tonality, in terms of tonality it takes on the speaker, is a little bit more towards like the Sonos Fiber side. So Mads, you were right about that one. But it is not entirely kind of more accurate sounding. To me, a totem is a more accurate kind of tone, has a little bit of a more leaner tone to strings and instruments, but this is more of like that Sonos Fiber kind of KLH kind of tone it takes on, more Sonos Fiber than KLH or totem actually. Has that warmer characteristic, has that little more texture and layering to the instrument, so it gives you a little bit of warm sound if you like that warm. And who likes warm? Tujin.
I do.
He likes warm. So he hates bright.
I do. No sibilance with this speaker.
Yes, no sibilance with this speaker. The high frequency is very refined and extended though. Like you can tell right off the bat is extended compared
Remember
to the S400.
when we played that German song?
Hande?
Yeah.
Great song. Now on this track, to go with, is a bonus track. I didn't have it on my notes, but this track particularly has a lot of vocal sibilances, like because German, right?
Yeah.
And with certain tracks like the Quad S2s, I found it too bright for my liking. With this speaker cranked up, loud, no vocal sibilances whatsoever, and very enjoyable.
I can vouch for that.
And in terms of soundstage and imaging, and to test really how good the speaker really is, one of the tracks that I tried was Engine of Creation by Joe Satriani. I butchered that. I'm sorry. But this track has electric guitar. Now this electric guitar can get a little bit bright. Now this is due to the recording itself. I mean, I play this track on other speakers, it destroys my ears. Sometimes it's not playable. But at loud volumes, the Buchardt S400 Mk2 can get bright with the electric guitars on this specific track. However, on normal levels, if you're a normal person and you don't like to rock out, to really crazy levels, then it won't get bright. Now with this track in particular, you can hear all the little elements in the music, and the soundstage immediately becomes larger. It's really a good track for testing holographic soundstage and 3D imaging. Now when it comes to this track, I wrote here that really good, but not as good as some horn designs. So the sound staging is not as big or grand as some horn designs, but it images better within the soundstage. And when it comes to normal speakers, comparing to like normal bookshelf speakers, the S400 Mk2 hands down has a larger soundstage and more refined, bigger layering compared to other bookshelf speakers in this price category of $2,500. It compares with like speakers $10,000. So there's already enough said about that one.
There was so much depth.
So much depth. You can really tell like where the performances are taking place. A little bit behind, a little bit forward. You can really pinpoint it without that brightness, which is what I love. Now, when it comes to another track that I tried was the Ode to Boy live. Now, this recording again can get bright. Like the vocal sibilances are really apparent there. And this is a natural thing about this recording is that the vocal sibilants go so it gets bright with speakers. But this is a really good track if you want to test out sound staging and the holographic sound staging again and imaging because it's a live recording. And so I tried this track and I love this track because it gives you a very good indication of how big the sound staging really is. And playing this track, I found that the soundstage actually stretches out of my room, the boundaries. On normal tracks, the soundstage is contained in my room. But with live recordings, this speaker goes out of my room. And you don't have that with a lot of bookshelf speakers. Usually it's contained in my space and it doesn't stretch out as much even with live recordings. But with this speaker, the sound staging and holographic sound staging is enormous. And this track has that component where it goes like tush, tush, tush. If you hear it, you know what I'm talking about. It goes like tush, tush, tush. So it has that 3 tush, tush, tush. And that kind of gives you an indication of how far the soundstage really extends. Like if you physically, look at it and follow it, the sound, then you can really tell that it's actually stretching out of the room. I would say the first tush is inside the room. The second tush, the half of it is, it's like almost like in between, and then the third one is definitely out of the room. So that's a very good indication. Now, the impressive thing is that yes, horn speakers actually, go out of the room. Like both of my all of my third tushes would be out of the room and with certain good horn speakers. However, this speaker, the impressive thing is that you can really pinpoint it. With horn speakers, sometimes I have to really listen for that tush. I'll be like, okay, it's somewhere there. Okay, I think, yeah, it's out of the room, right? This speaker, I didn't have to listen to it twice. I could immediately tell, tush, tush, tush. Yep, it's 1.5 out of the room. Now, one thing that I want to note here is that because the speaker is a more refined speaker and now kind of takes on that high-end speaker vibe and sound, poor recordings. How does it do on poor recordings? That's very important, right? Dream on, my example of poor recordings.
You got bashed for that recording.
I got bashed for that recording, which I'm okay with. I test poor recordings as well. And when I say poor recordings, by the way, some of you guys are asking, is it the file, bit rate? Is it? No, I'm talking about how it's recorded. Some recordings are recorded really well, really well mixed and mastered and all that stuff. Some recordings are just not. They're just terrible. And a lot of modern recordings is a very good example of that with like terrible autotune and stuff. What? Gasp. Some are good. Some modern recordings are good, but just some. Anyways. The point being here is that I played this track and it was bearable. But I would say the original S400 would have been what I preferred with poor recordings. It's not as good as the S400 with poor recordings. And that is something that is kind of, unfortunately, just a thing. When you come to a point where a speaker performs better, the better it performs, the better the recording you play, the better it sounds. Usually it doesn't do the opposite way, right?
It's not as forgiving.
Right, because it's really good at the speaker's now really good at dissecting the components of the music. So that's just the downside. But I was surprised to find that, I thought it was going to totally destroy poor recordings, but it was actually pretty good. Another track that I play is Honesty by Billy Joel. Not a very good recording. It's okay. And this track was actually pretty good on the Buchardt S400 Mk2. It didn't totally destroy it, but I actually preferred it, on the original S400. So that's pretty much it. If you found this video helpful, then consider clicking that like button and clicking that subscribe button. We have way more coming on this channel, and I'll see you guys on the next one.